Volcano the Blast Coaster was an ultra-unique launch coaster formerly at King's Dominion. While this was a great ride and arguably the most popular attraction in the park, it was unfortunately removed in 2019 due to a few issues. This has left a large gap in the Cedar Fair Parks lineup. But next week, the park is heavily rumored to announce a wing coaster to replace it. Before that happens, I wanted to review Volcano, discussing that ride's pros and cons. In 1979, King's Dominion erected the Lost World. This was a mountain added to their Safari Village section with 3 rides, a dark ride, a log flume, and a rotor. In 1984, the dark ride was rethemed to the Smurfs and named Smurf Mountain. Paramount acquired King's Dominion in 1993 and immediately made changes to the mountain. Due to dwindling popularity, all 3 rides were closed by the end of the 1994 season, and the mountain was sealed off. At the same time, Paramount developed plans to place a new ride in the structure. The company hired Intamin to build a launched inverted coaster. The initial theme would have been to the 1995 film Congo, but this was scrapped after the film's negative reception. Instead, they pivoted and themed it around the 1997 film Volcano. This led to Volcano the Blast Coaster. This was a brilliant choice. Since a giant crater was created at the apex to accommodate the new coaster, the structure resembled a volcano anyway. The ride would open in 1998, but it was delayed until late summer due to technical issues. While Intamin had been designing coasters for 2 decades, this would be their first launch coaster. Volcano would use linear induction motors or LIMs for the launch. This technology had been successfully implemented in 1996 by Premier Rides for their Flight of Fear clones, one of which was located at King's Dominion right next to Volcano, but it was still a relatively new and complicated technology. In its opening year, Volcano only had a single LIM launch that created 2 issues. 1. The power demands were so high that King's Dominion needed to build a separate substation just for this ride. 2. The trains were not consistently clearing the inversion through the volcano. This led to frequent rollbacks. So Intamin offered a short-term fix: operate the ride at half capacity. The ride opened in August of that year with half the seats removed. For the 1999 season, a second LIM launch was added as you entered the volcano. This allowed the coaster to successfully operate at its intended capacity. That was still really low, and ultimately played a part in the ride's demise. For the next 2 decades, Volcano was the park's flagship attraction. Flash forward to 2018. In the spring of that year, Volcano suffered a major breakdown. This closed the coaster for the remainder of the season. The following year, King's Dominion announced that Volcano would be removed, citing issues with reliability and guest satisfaction. And by May of that year, the coaster and structure had been removed. This left a gaping hole in King's Dominion's lineup. That finally will be filled in 2025. The park is heavily rumored to be adding a launched Balger and Mabillard wing coaster. I am sure this will be a good ride, but will it be better than Volcano? I'm not too sure about that, and the ride inevitably will be compared to its predecessor. Now, I want to run through the issues given by the park for Volcano's closure. First, reliability. Outside the ride's opening and final year, the ride was actually fairly reliable. The most common issue was the occasional rollback. The train would safely roll back to the first launch, where riders would be evacuated with a rolling platform. The train would then be reset and relaunched shortly thereafter. The biggest issue I heard about was related to the volcano itself. The structure was not originally designed for a roller coaster. Parts of it were starting to fall apart. The structure also made the coaster very difficult to access for maintenance. Second, guest satisfaction. In terms of the ride itself, Volcano was absolutely loved. It was the crowd favorite. But remember how the ride had low capacity? That led to painstakingly long queues and frustrated guests. After Fastlane was rolled out, the ride regularly had waits exceeding an hour, even on quiet days, and if you visited on a busy day, it could easily exceed 2 hours. When I first rode this coaster in 2006, I had to wait 2.5 hours on a hot summer day. I loved the ride, but it was not a pleasant queuing experience. Volcano operated with 2 trains. Each train had 8 rows of 2, seating up to 16 riders max. The ride cycled roughly every 2 minutes, leading to an average capacity of just 480 riders per hour. The park tweaked the load platform setup in 2014 in an effort to improve the throughput. Originally, the coaster had separate load and unload platforms. It was reconfigured to have just one. If you've ridden Wildcat's Revenge at Hershey Park when it's operating with just 2 trains, you know how the separate unload platform can slow down operations. This change helped Volcano's capacity somewhat, but not enough. The ride's throughput was still close to a wild mouse, which is extremely low for any coaster in a major park, especially the flagship attraction. Further exasperating the issue, a decent chunk of the ride's capacity was going to the fast lane skip the line pass. So why do I think Volcano was ultimately removed? Whatever broke in 2018 was very expensive and/or difficult to fix. It also should be pointed out that King's Dominion was owned by Cedar Fair at this point, who have a very poor relationship with the ride's manufacturer and Intamin. Combined with the ride's pitiful throughput, the park decided it would be more prudent to replace Volcano with something else, even if that would be years down the road. With all of that out of the way, I want to talk about what it was like to actually experience this coaster. To enter the area, you passed under a large archway bearing the ride's name. Then the ride itself had an absolute presence. The volcano was large and looked like something from a Disney park. Then you had yellow track flipping out the top, and some other inversions around the structure. The supports looked a bit messy because there were a gazillion of them, which isn't too surprising if you've seen the other Intamin inverts in Europe, but the coaster was mesmerizing to watch as it navigated the layout. And as a bonus, the coaster would periodically erupt and shoot a fireball into the sky. It was a sight to behold. Now let's talk about the queue. The ride was loosely themed to an expedition. It started by taking you through a rocky cave. You then encounter a room of switchbacks. There wasn't much to see, and it was miserable. They were covered, but the switchbacks were cramped and plentiful. Through the 2013 season, you'd then head down a ramp into the volcano. This would take you to the left side of the load platform. From 2014 onwards, you would take a staircase down to the station, boarding from the right side instead. When you reach the station, you are free to select any row you'd like. For me, there was only one place to ride Volcano, the very front row. This was usually a few extra trains, but I was happy to wait it. I loved feeling the full power of the launch and having a full view of the volcano. The ride seats and restraints were identical to the Tornado inverts in Europe, or the company's Impulse coasters. You had a large over-the-shoulder harness. While the ride was fairly smooth, it was possible to tap your head in a few directional changes, so I always found it smart to lean forwards a bit. These restraints were particularly problematic if you were larger. The seat belts were super short, so many guests were unfortunately turned away. Once dispatched, you slowly moved forward and turned left. You'd then see the LIMs above you as you rolled onto the launch track. Once the back row cleared the turn and was on the launch, you'd suddenly accelerate forwards. This was an awesome launch. For one, it was suspenseful. Since I regularly rode up front, I couldn't quite see when the back made it onto the launch track, so it always took me by surprise when the launch started. 2, it was powerful, especially for a magnetic launch made in the 1990s. It had a strong kick and would pin me to my seat. The speed was fantastic anyway, but it was amplified by the dark tunnel. It was easily one of my favorite launches and the best part of the ride for me. You were then snapped left. This was the one spot where you could hit your head if you were not careful. You then flew around a 180-degree turn. While this turn was wide, it still offered solid positive Gs, and the sense of speed was phenomenal. Not many rides have you navigate a low turn like this at high speeds. This led into the second set of LIMs. While it wasn't as punchy as the first launch, it offered a noticeable kick. This is where you hit the ride's max speed of 70 miles per hour or 113 kilometers per hour, making it the world's fastest inverted coaster when it opened. This shot you into the volcano. This led to the world's tallest inversion at the time, a 155-foot, or 47-meter tall rollout. What's a rollout? It's not only Miltank's weapon of destruction, but this was essentially a large sidewinder out of the volcano. It was just compressed at the apex. This element was cool for a few reasons. One, it was super disorienting. The inside of the volcano was dark and a mess of supports. All of a sudden, he'd pull upwards into a flip, being blinded by the sun. 2, it had good positive Gs. The climb was quick and forceful. 3, you just exited a freaking volcano. The rest of the layout took place high above the structure, so it didn't have the same sense of speed as the start. I know this was an issue for some, but not for me. I still liked the elements. The visuals winding above the volcano were still sweet, and the following 3 inversions were better with less speed. After the rollout, there was a banked turn left that led into a heartline roll. This offered incredible hang time. There also was a great foot chopper with a support as you exited it. Next was a left turn to the back side of the structure. This led to another heartline roll. The hang time was equally as great, but this one was a bit better because of how close it got to the volcano. This created an additional leg chopper. You then turned right for the 4th and final inversion. Another heartline roll. This was identical to the first one with your final dose of hang time. The exit immediately transitioned into a swooping drop to the right. This built up a lot of speed as you dove back into the volcano. You then slammed to a stop in total darkness, again getting a chance to check out the mountain's dense support structure. You then returned to the station, ending the 2,757-foot or 840-meter long coaster. This coaster felt a bit short because of how much speed it had going into the brakes, but it actually had a respectable duration. Launch to brakes, volcano was roughly 44 seconds. You know what coaster also takes that long drop to brakes? This ride's nearby neighbor, the ride formerly known as Intimidator 305, and I don't really see people calling that ride short. I know some found Volcano's layout a bit repetitive, and I'll admit the second half was. You had a turn followed by a heartline roll repeated 3 times. I do wish the turns had a bit more power to them, but I didn't mind the same heartline roll over and over and over. See, I'm a big fan of hang time, so I welcomed the repetition. It's akin to a hypercoaster as the same bunny hill over and over. That's also repetitive, but if you like airtime, you probably are not going to complain. So, what would I rate Volcano the Blast Coaster? I would give this coaster a 9 out of 10. This Intamin Invert truly was one of a kind. The integration of the volcano gave this ride an undeniably epic aesthetic. Then the layout was exciting as well. The initial launch was among the best of any coaster. And unlike some launch coasters that are one-trick ponies, this ride followed up with a great layout. Then the 4 inversions were all excellent. There was the picturesque rollout out of the mountain, and 3 wonderful heartline rolls. Do I wish it was longer? Sure, but I'd say that with most coasters that are this fun. It's crazy to think that King's Dominion has removed 2 of the most intense launch coasters out there. Years before Volcano was removed, the park also removed Hypersonic XLC, the first pneumatic launch coaster from S&S. I never rode that coaster, but I heard the launch was downright insane. But it was a much more finicky and problematic ride, so its removal is much more understandable. Like many, I was stunned and saddened the day that King's Dominion announced Volcano's closure, because this was a special ride and a crowd favorite. I am excited for 2 Cedar Fair editions next year that will be the spiritual successors to this coaster though. I mentioned King's Dominion's likely B&M launch coaster, but Canada's Wonderland is heavily rumored to be adding a Premier Rides multi-launch coaster that'll shoot you out of Wonder Mountain. This could be the closest thing we get to replicating Volcano, and I'm really excited for that project. So those are my thoughts on Volcano the Blast Coaster. What are your thoughts about King's Dominion's defunct launch coaster? Did you ride it? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, I would appreciate it if you gave this video a like, and you consider subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.